The topic that I thought would be nice, kind of topic, is just a mini picture of Bhagavad Gita. You have bring a copy. Bhagavad Gita is a. Oh, okay. This is. Yeah, I want to see one of those. Not this. You heard of it before? Hey, how about you? Heard of Bhagavad Gita? I heard the word?
No.
Okay, well, once upon a time, I was a young man. And my professor in college gave me a copy. It wasn't this one. Another one. And just a nice story of how I got it started. He was we had a friendship outside of class, and we did many things together. He's like a nice person. One of the things that he did is he wrote poetry, so he would sometimes read to me his poetry, and he'd get into it. So one day when he gave me a copy of this, I thought, it's a book of poetry. And I was carrying it around with me along with my books and my clipboard and things. And another friend said, hey, I have one of those, but it's different. You take mine too. So I have 2 copies of Bhagavad Gita. And I thought, wait a minute, if there's 2 copies of Bhagavad Gita, maybe there's more. So I went to the library, and there were 5 other translations of Bhagavad Gita. So I checked them all out and started reading them. And I came to 2 conclusions. It's not a book of poetry, and I don't understand it. Some time passed. Somebody gave me this one, number 8. Started reading it. It was really easy to understand. And I was puzzled. Why I couldn't understand the first 7, and this was so easy to understand, but I kept reading it. And then it became clear why it was easy to understand, because it was spoken from realization. It wasn't spoken from an academic, speculative, interpreting this means that kind of approach. It was just spoken or written from realization. The subject matter of Bhagavad Gita, there are different ways of describing what it is, but it's a treatise on self-realization, or another way of describing it is it's the yoga system, starting from understanding basics of the soul and matter are different, and then gradual connecting that the consciousness of the soul, higher and higher stages, up to the stage of complete realization of the potential of a living being in the human form of life. So that's Bhagavad Gita. This is meant to be a little introduction to Bhagavad Gita. On the screen it says here, the Bhagavad Gita, the divine song of Bhagavan. So, Gita is a Sanskrit word that means, in English, it means singing. Gita. It's not just speaking, but singing. Gita. So the song, and Bhagavad is a derivative. It means in relation to Bhagavan, the song of Bhagavan. Bhagavan, another Sanskrit word, it means one who possesses all divine opulences. Bhagavan. And so the one who possesses all divine opulences from the other parts of the Vedic text, that's the Supreme Person. For example, there's subdivisions, but 6 primary opulences: knowledge, someone that's very, very knowledgeable, very wise, very learned, Albert Einstein or some, brilliant person, they're looked at with regard, with respect. One who's wealthy, one who's beautiful, one who has great strength, etc. These opulences, when they're possessed in their fullest possible capacity, no one is equal to that person who has all six. Whoever that all six person is, that's Bhagavan, or the Supreme Person. So it's the Song of Bhagavan, Bhagavad Gita. And in the text of Bhagavad Gita, it's revealed that that person has a name. There's many names, but one of his names is Krishna. Krishna means all attractive because persons are attracted to opulence. We're attracted to someone who is very beautiful, or someone who's very wealthy, or someone who's very strong, or someone who's very famous. So Krishna means all attractive. So Krishna is the primary speaker in Bhagavad Gita, and the person who he's speaking to is his friend and his devotee Arjuna, who's pictured here. Krishna is on the left side, wearing that nice big garland. And on the right side is Arjuna, and Arjuna is his friend, a great warrior, particularly really good at archery, of firing not just regular old arrows, but arrows that are empowered, and they use mantra and so forth and so on. So he's very elevated warrior, and the scene in Bhagavad Gita, as you see in the image here, there's a battle, long story. On one side, cousin brothers, on the other side, cousin brothers. And they're about to have a big, big battle. And Arjuna asks his friend Krishna, who's playing the part of the chariot driver of Arjuna, please draw the chariot between the two armies so I can see who's arrayed, who's lined up here. And he sees the scene, and he drops his bow and says, I'm out of here. I can't go through with this for the following reasons. And they're very ethical, high-sounding reasons. Give 7 different reasons. And then he gets bewildered and says, really, I don't know what's best for me, so please instruct me. So their friendship relationship shifts, and the instructor and instructed relationship begins. That's where the heart of Bhagavad Gita is, instructions that Krishna gives to understand who you are, and what your duties in life, how they're determined, and how they should be done. How to realize you're not just conceptually and notionally acknowledge who you are, become fully realized in who you are through that system, through yoga system. I'm going to read this short paragraph on the screen here. The Bhagavad Gita is universally renowned as the jewel of India's spiritual wisdom, spoken by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to his intimate disciple Arjuna. The Gita's 700 verses, concise verses, provide a definitive guide to the science of self-realization. No other philosophical or religious work reveals in such a lucid and profound way the nature of consciousness, the self, the universe, and the supreme. So it's a lot of topics to cover concisely. That is to say, that concise expression has expanded forms in different departments of knowledge. But we're just going to do a Bhagavad Gita 101 talk here. What is it basically? According to over the many generations, there have been learned persons, learned devotees of Krishna, who have given explanation. And the one that's in this version of Bhagavad Gita follows a great acharya named Baladev Vidyabhusan, who indicated that there are 5 principal topics in Bhagavad Gita. And here they are, one by one. I'll skip the Sanskrit terms. Well, God, in the upper left there. Then the soul, and the soul is distinct from God, but part and qualitatively like the Supreme. Material nature, and time. You see that little timepiece a couple more times this evening. And karma. So I'll do it again. Let's start at the bottom. We'll start at the upper right. There's the soul, and the soul's involved in or engaged with material nature, like stuff that's all around us. And the soul engaged in material nature engages in activity. And there's activity that's called karma that binds the living entity to the laws of material nature and keeps that living entity in bondage lifetime after lifetime, as long as the consciousness is directed towards trying to be the enjoyers of those activities and the fruits of those activities. That's karma. And with the karma comes the bondage, the reaction. Action, reaction. Fruit of activity. And to do activity, it requires time, and time's a very interesting topic. Not just a timepiece, but it's a potency, a force, an energy that moves things. It brings things into being, and it destroys things. Time, energy. And then the one that's the controller of all those things, the other 4 things. Here's a picture some of the artists put together that show the material nature is made up of 8 elements. It's meant to be depicted by the artwork here. The bottom there, of course, is earth, water, fire, air, and sky. Anyway, this is a Bhagavad Gita conception. My understanding is Greek philosophy also held the same idea. There's 5 principal elements, gross elements. And aside from the gross elements, there's 3 more. And they're the subtle ones, the ones you can't see: mind, intelligence, and false ego. According to Bhagavad Gita, everything of this world is made up of those 8 mixed in different proportions. Everything. Everything that's of the material realm. And what the image is showing is that little spark in the middle of the flames there. That's the soul, which is distinct from matter. And then next to the soul is the Supreme Soul. Here's what Bhagavad Gita says. This is now, we'll go through very quickly in a summary way. There's the soul itself, one of the 5 topics of Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita teaches that the soul can be experienced or perceived not by seeing with the eyes, but experienced and perceived by the presence of consciousness or the absence of consciousness. When the soul departs the body, consciousnness departs the body. Or the table over there, there's no soul, there's no consciousness. But wherever there's symptoms of consciousness, we know there's a soul present. Like, let's say, a little insect walking across the floor. or over in the corner there's a plant. So wherever there's life, there's consciousness, and wherever there's consciousness, there's a soul. So down to microscopic microbial germs, up to the biggest forms of life, it's the same principle as the soul that's animating and manifesting consciousness through the body. Many spiritual traditions in the world, or of the world, accept consciousness as being a symptom of the soul, mentioned already. At the time of death, all physical and chemical components of the body remain in place, but something non-physical has been lost. That's the soul departs. Even through our language, we identify ourselves as being different from the body. Here in Chicago, in many of our centers all around, it's kind of common, not all the time, but with pandemic, nothing was normal. But prior to, and I'm sure it'll start up again, in high school and college classes that study philosophy or Eastern religion or world religion or things like that, and the professors, they want to give their students something more than a textbook explanation. So it's common. They'll bring their students to the temple to firsthand experience what Bhagavad Gita teaching is in living practice, or what Vaishnavism is, or something. They have different ideas, different labels. I've learned this from those visits, that often what's taught in the classroom is the difference between this group and that group is the rituals they follow, because that's observable. So they speak about things that are observable. And then there's variations amongst groups. Some do it this way, some do it that way. And that's how they evaluate, or that's how they teach about world religions. So they like to come when we do our rituals. And a good time, it fits in well with their schedule, is in our temples every morning at around 7:30, or precisely at 7:30, 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, so we do some of our ritual things that people can see, the people that come to visit. There's the blowing of a conch. It sounds like a trumpet. And that's a ritual. And then there's a curtain opens, because during the morning before 7 o'clock, there was some worship going on. So the curtain opens, and that's a ritual. And there's a nice song that's played of singing words in praise of Krishna, and some offering of obeisances or prayers before the deity form, then worshiping the spiritual master, because this message was brought to the West by an elderly saint or gentleman. And there's a form of him in the back of our temple room. So we offer incense and flowers and things. And so that's another ritual. And then we sit down and we have a little discussion, which is, as far as they're concerned, one of our rituals. And they like to have some talk. Generally, it's a one-on-one talk. And then questions and answers. I'm sharing all this for a particular reason. One of the things that generally gets some audience interaction is asking the class, I want to ask a question, but I want to ask it of the smartest kids in the class. So who's the smartest kid in the class? And everybody knows who the smartest kid in the class is. Everybody looks at the one person who's the smartest kid in the class. Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions, and you see if you can respond. Point to your head, point to your arm, point to your knee, point to your neck. Now point to you. And they stop. Or sometimes they'll go like this. You means the whole thing. That's me. Because I have the body. So that's me. But we say, my hand, my head, my arm, my leg. Who's the my? My is the possessor of the object. That's what this last point is. Even through our language, we identify ourselves as being different from the body. And Bhagavad Gita teaches us, one of the 5 essential teachings is we're different than the body. Now, how do you prove that? Well, if intelligence, it's not difficult to understand. There's some scientific evidence, there's abundant scientific evidence that doesn't prove, but it indicates. Now, maybe some of you are familiar with this, out-of-body experiences. You're familiar? Yes, okay. They have an acronym, OBE, out-of-body experience. You've heard of it before? Yeah. The first one I came in contact with was from a heart surgeon at Emory University in Atlanta. He wrote a book about it afterwards. So during open heart surgery, that little machine on the left side showed cardiac arrest. And then when there's a cardiac arrest, they go into emergency procedures. And the patient survived. And after the surgery was completed, the doctor went to visit his patient. And, how's it going? And the patient told him of his out-of-body experience. He was hovering above the operation table about 6 feet. He heard the assistant say to the doctor such and such. The doctor said such and such. They had to, they followed the procedure. He knew exactly who said what to whom. Like, good memory. And the doctor was in disbelief. How is this possible? So he pursued it. And long story short, a whole book, many other practicing physicians had similar reports from their patients. And he thought there's got to be some explanation for this because he's a medical doctor. There's got to be a physiological, biological, something or other explanation. And after pursuing it, reluctantly, he had to conclude, without all what's made up of in the book, consciousness is something that's separate from the body. And what was being experienced was the conscious self lifted from the body and was looking down upon the body. And that conscious self was able to retain memory of what the experience was. And then, of course, re-entered the body when the cardiac arrest, because cardiac arrest means the heart stops pumping. When the heart stops pumping, no blood goes to the brain. And when no blood goes to the brain, how can you register anything? You can't. Because, if the mechanism is, without all the medical, nomenclature, there's no cognition if blood doesn't go to the brain. But somehow the person that survived was during cardiac arrest when blood wasn't going to the brain. Many other books, many other places. There's a lady I read her book from Washington State, University of Washington Medical Center. I'll tell the story. It's nice telling stories. She had an experience with a patient that not only was above the operating table, but the patient floated across the ceiling, went up out the window, 2 flights, and was hovering just outside the janitor's closet. Then inside the janitor's closet, she described after the surgery, and she survived, what she saw in the window outside the janitor's closet. And she saw and on the ledge was a pair of sneakers. And the sneakers had a rip and a different colored shoelaces on the ledge just outside. So she's like, this is crazy. So she got the janitor, and the janitor said, I just rearranged things, so it's like in a different place. But the way it was described, then she looked up, and there was the sneaker with a ripped thing and the color of shoelaces. You can't see it from the inside of the building. So, again, disbelief. How's this? And did her research and other doctors, and these are, anyway, it doesn't prove anything. It's just, it's hard to conclude something else. Here's the main point. Consciousness is different than the body. And it can exist, it does exist, even when the body is not functioning. So whether it's cardiac arrest or death, the soul isn't destroyed, the soul continues to exist. The consciousness continues beyond the material circumstances. So here's another teaching that's found in Bhagavad Gita. Conventionally, it's known as reincarnation. This photograph that you see is an exhibit in Los Angeles. At the Los Angeles Center, there's an exhibition. This is one of the exhibits where it's really nice. I'll share. You go. The museum is prearranged so that at the right time the lights go out. Anything, because the lights are out. You're in this enclosed museum space, and the lights go out. And then there's a rear light that shines on a mylar mirror. A mylar mirror it reflects, but then you can see through it, depending upon the lighting. So when the light goes out, you feel like you're in India. Electricity just went out. And then you hear a voice, a British, deep, resonating voice saying, because the light comes on, and all the people are standing there looking at the mylar mirror, and the voice says, "Who are you? Take a good look at yourselves. Are you that body?" And then the light dims, you're dark again. And then another light goes and shines like a spotlight, shines on the embryo, that little one. Well, you can see where the embryo is at the bottom. And you hear this recording is a heartbeat. Thud, 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 thud. Then a light is shining, and then in that embryo, then the light goes out, the soul transmigrating to the next form, and that's a little baby. And then you hear the recording of a baby crying. Ah, ah, ah. And then there's like nice classical music in the background, kind of pleasant sounding. Then the babble of a small child and the sound of boys playing a ball, because the light keeps moving. It's the soul moving from one situation to the next. And up till the final one, different voices and different sounds, etc., sound effects. And then the man on the far right starts coughing and coughing, and then he coughs his last. And then it shows the soul going back to the embryo within the womb. It's meant to depict a concept that's in Bhagavad Gita. It isn't guaranteed after this life, the life form will be human, but whatever the life form is, the soul, it doesn't go out of existence. The soul continues to exist and takes shelter corresponding to consciousness in a particular life form. So the consciousness that we develop in this life is determining the life form that we'll receive after this life. This is a Bhagavad Gita understanding. And where the soul takes shelter is within some feature of material nature. Now the illustration is showing some puppeteer ladies and some puppets down at the bottom. The puppets down at the bottom, that's us. That one is a worker and the other is a supervisor of workers. And that's the fruit of workers. And what's the puppeteer, those are the modes of nature corresponding to yellow, red, and blue, like the three primary colors. Now, any one of these points can be expanded and explained more deeply and so forth. I'm just doing a 30,000 feet overview. Modes of nature are acting, influencing our thoughts and our feelings and our experiences and our speech and our behavior according to the modes of nature. Just by mixing, by mixing the three primary colors, you can get any color. You know how to mix them. So also these three modes of nature, the lighter one being goodness, the red one being passion, and the dark one being ignorance. So goodness, passion, and ignorance mixed makes all the varieties of life that we find in this world. So as we're moving in the course of this life and on to the next one, those modes of nature are always acting through the medium of material nature, and above them all is the Supreme. Here's an image showing, now here's a third factor, time energy, we mentioned it at the beginning. I said you'd see this image again. Here are some of the things that it says about time in Bhagavad Gita. Time is an energy. It's not, there's measurements of time, but what is time that you're measuring? It's an energy that's a force that moves things. Time energy moves things. It takes time to walk across the floor. Without time, you can't do anything. With time, you can do things in the material sphere. It's a really fascinating concept. Time is actually eternal, but within the realm of creation, this is a Gita concept. Within the realm of creation, there's past, present, future. And there's higher scales of time in the higher planetary systems, lower scales of time in the lower forms of life, like the duration of life for some entities, some microbes or bugs or things. It's a very short period of time. Their whole lifetime is a few hours or a few days and finished. And for us, it's some number of years, and for the higher planets, it's many, many, many more years. Time is relative, is the point. But it's still moving things. It brings things into being. It takes time to build this place. It's going to take some time, but this place is going to dissolve. Whether it's wrecking ball or just time dissolves it. Everything that comes into being through time energy will also dissipate over time. Time destroys. So I'm not going to go in. It's nice. The cause of transformation of material nature is time. I'll mention this. It's a nice understanding. The Vedic means is ancient literatures in Sanskrit. So the Vedic literatures describe time moves in cycles. Again, small ones, medium ones, big ones, and really, really big ones. Just like, for example, day and night. And just keep cycling, day and night. And then there's other cycles, months and years, and seasons. They cycle. There's variety, but they cycle. And depending upon your where you are on the planet, they're going to be like this or they're going to be like that, and they just keep cycling. And then there's bigger ones, and there's bigger ones, and there's bigger ones. So one of the biggest ones is the cosmic creation, maintenance for some time, and then annihilation. According to the Vedic picture of time, it's cyclical. When cosmic annihilation comes, there's a resting period of equal duration for as the manifestation, then again creation. It's because time doesn't stop. There's cycles of time, but it doesn't stop. In this material world, it doesn't stop. Now, the idea of the yoga system is to connect where time is eternal. There is such a thing, a spiritual world. And in the spiritual world, things aren't created and things aren't destroyed. And there's no movement of time. It's a different place. According to the Vedic teaching, this place is a reflection of that place. Or in the biblical understanding, man is created in the image of God. There's a spiritual reality, and this is a creation that's a reflection of the spiritual reality. In the spiritual reality, time is eternal. In this place, time is past, present, future, but time is moving things. Eternal time and past, present, future time. It's a mind-expanding concept. Those are 3 topics, and they didn't include the other 2. Well, karma, the work that binds one. That was another. Gets a lot of verses in Bhagavad Gita describing karma, and important in Bhagavad Gita is to understand. For self-realization, it's necessary to realign yourself with what the purpose of activity is. On the binding side, if it works to get a result, that's passion. You do something to get something, you get a result, and then try to be the enjoyer of the result. That's the principle of karma. And there's a teaching, a yoga teaching, that explains how to work without the bondage of the results of work. So if you work and there's results, but no bondage, where do the results go? Simple. You'll make the offering of the results unto the Supreme. It's a simple principle. Very simple principle. And one who lives their life that way is free from bondage. Free from the cycle of birth and death. The soul is going to continue to exist. But where does the soul go after this body? Well, if you're attached to the temporary, it stays in the realm of the temporary. Birth after birth. And if the fruits of activity are offered to the Supreme, then that's where you go. To the realm of the Supreme, where things are eternal. That's the concept in principle. And then there's description of the lifestyle. But I'm just touching on one of the topics, one of the 5 main topics in Bhagavad Gita is fruitive work and how to become free from bondage by offering the fruits of work properly to the Supreme. A really nice example, maybe you've seen pictures, maybe you've even been in India and have seen it happen. The standard of worshiping of Ganges, because Ganges is a sacred river, so the holy men, when they take their sacred bath in the Ganges, they take palmfuls of Ganges, say some mantras and prayers, and offer palmfuls of Ganges to the Ganges. The Ganges doesn't need pumpfuls. And Ganges got plenty more where that came from. But it's the act of offering back to that which is the source, the gratitude and offerings unto that source. So, as with the Ganges, so with the Supreme. Our ability to do anything, our ability to digest our food, our ability to blink our eyelids, our ability to walk across the floor, ability to do anything comes from an energetic source. In fact, if that ability is withdrawn, we can't do anything. The fact that we can do something, the ability is invested in us. It's not our energy. It's not our capacity. It's an empowerment to do something. And we take that capacity with gratitude towards the source and offer it to the source. That's yoga. Yoga of devotion to the source of all things. And that's the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. This is the final slide. I like this illustration. On the left side, a big hill. It's a living entity within the womb of a mother. On the right side is death. And in between is life. So what goes into that space? How are we supposed to utilize the space that we now have in between birth and death? And during that period of time, there's problems. And the chief amongst them is birth and death. And how are you going to address that problem? Besides shrug your shoulders and say, that's life. Bhagavad Gita is teaching how to make a solution to the problems of birth and death, unwanted things, disease and old age. These four are mentioned specifically in Bhagavad Gita. Items of knowledge is to understand these are the real problems and how to overcome them. How do you overcome disease? If you don't have a material body, you won't have disease. If you don't have a material body, you won't have death, you won't have old age. And rebirth comes when there is attachment to the temporary and the cycle keeps moving. So how to bring consciousness, which is who we are, to the place, to the Supreme, to the place that's not bound in trying to be the enjoyer of all the temporary things of existence. Instead, let those temporary things of existence be offered to the Supreme. It's a very simple principle. And Bhagavad Gita teaches the how-to, the why as well, the consequences of not living one's life that way, the bondage that comes, and the lacking of a solution to the real problems. So that's, I was asked to speak something that would be simple enough for persons that don't know so much about this way of life and the Bhagavad Gita teaching, so that's what I tried to do. And particularly our newer people that are less familiar with this than some of the rest of us. Any comments or questions you have on this would be most welcome. We have a portable microphone, so if there's some people remote listening, so they can hear if you want to speak into the microphone.
When they say consciousness and mind identical ideas?
No.
No. Is it to do with the way in which consciousness is distributed?
Yes.
Could you elaborate
Sure.
a little?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. There's functions of consciousness and there's functions of mind. yes, consciousness animates the mind, but the mind has a function on behalf of the conscious self. It's three main functions: thinking or contemplating, and then after you contemplate something, some feelings about what you contemplated on, and then developing a will or desire to do something about, you like or you don't like, that contemplation, the emotion, thinking, feeling, willing, precedes action. And that force that animates the mind is consciousness. It's like light permeating, and then the light activates something over there and something over there and something over there. Light, consciousness is it's the self extended through the body and the subtle body, the mind. So like, scratching my arm. There's a sensation that records in the brain from over here. There's a mechanism for that. But that information then goes to the mind. It's subtle. You can't see the mind. But animating the whole machine, because it's a machine, the Sanskrit word is yantra, it's a machine. And the mind has that function. It's thinking, feeling, willing. Information processing. Computer technology is modeled after the mind. The mind is said to be a binary processor, and as is, it's a 1 or a 0. So it's you like it or you don't like it.
And the mind is a kind of ordering of consciousness.
Yes. Yes. It reaches through the senses, according to, this is Bhagavad Gita, it's pretty simple. The senses reach out and gather information. Like, this wall is this color and that wall is that color, and my consciousness is extending through the senses. That sense information is going to the central repository. The switchboard is the mind. And that one's red and that one's green. If my color capacity is working right. And then, that's, I'm reading it, and that's the information is stored. Very subtle form. So like the experiences are stored. The sensory experiences are stored. And then the intelligence is operating too. The intelligence gives direction that says, I don't like that color. Or, something. I see there's a smudge on the wall, I better go clean it. Or, something. The intelligence analyzes, and then some actions are done. But the driver is consciousness. Without consciousness, the whole machine doesn't move.
But
You got something.
think about a baby. So a baby has consciousness all the time.
Oh yeah.
Except the baby can't distinguish the difference between these levels. And the baby continues to move without, I don't know, I would assume without the mind saying you need to move now. You know what I'm saying?
I do
They're
know what you're saying.
conscious?
It's just immature. They're conscious of something,
Right.
and the discernment capacity isn't refined yet. It's not matured yet. The discernment capacity isn't matured yet. And so, for example, this is from the Bhagavad Gita. The earliest stage of consciousness is called anamoya. Everything is food. My shoe goes in my mouth. My brother's ear goes in my mouth. Everything goes in my mouth. Anamoya. And then there's a stage of the consciousness makes distinctions between animate, and inanimate things. So there's stages of evolution of consciousness up to. Your question specifically is, it's not developed, but there's mind. There's information coming into the mind from the senses of a baby, and it's processing, not maturely. And then according to culture, it'll be processed differently. And according to the instruments, some senses are more acute, visual, or some are more auditory, or some are more tactile. So senses develop differently for different persons as well. And that's all connected to, like, which body you get. And which body you get, two main factors: your past activity, karma, and then the modes of nature with which you're accustomed to associate. It's guna, modes of nature. And so here's a little, Prabhupada is my spiritual master. He said John Lennon in his previous life was a master musician. Now, how did he know that? I don't know. But, in his previous life, he was a master. So from his childhood, he was musically skilled. That's guna and karma, the modes of nature. And then, in the course of his life, by association, he developed this particular skill in music and that particular. So things evolve, but there's propensities.
Yeah.
Well, we're always making choices. See, even if you're born in a certain situation, someone poor can become wealthy, someone wealthy can become poor, etc. Someone that's musically skilled can not develop it. So there's choices. Free will is operative. It's along with consciousness. Our thoughtful member here. Free will is an aspect of consciousness. So things develop according to choices I'm making today, from things that are the resources that are at my disposal from yesterday. I'm making choices and evolving, going in whatever direction I go in, maybe devolving, maybe degrading in behavior or consciousness, or, become more covered and more dark and more, lost to reality.
What can we do in this life to influence us to reaching a higher plane, existence on a higher plane than this world that we know?
That's our topic.
That's what I'm asking you.
Well, that's my topic. Thank you for asking. Bhagavad Gita is a text that answers that question. Then there's, you need wisdom in order to go from point A to point B. Supposing you don't even know that point B exists. If you want to go, if you know the point, this is me as a college kid. It's a little bit like your question. This is me as a college kid. There's a higher reality, three things. There's a higher reality. I know it exists. Two, I know that I don't know what it is. And three, I want to know. That's the starting point for coming in contact with wisdom. Then some lights start going on. And then you have to act. Your free will choices are going on. You make some choices about, I'm going to move in this direction. I'm going to refrain from moving in that direction. And so there's things that one can do that can elevate consciousness. And there's habits that we can form that help to elevate consciousness. Here's one: cleanliness. There's a common saying: cleanliness is next to godliness. It's common. I find that it's there in China. They know that one too. Cleanliness, so it's a mode of goodness, quality. Cleanliness is a mode of good. The opposite is a darkness quality. So you do things that elevate in the modes of nature and make some kind of transcendental or spiritual connection with the source of everything. That's yoga. So, two things, keeping it simple. Frame your life in activities that are good. Not to say you don't, but it's just the answer to your question. Elevate goodness in life. Charity, compassion, tolerance, simplicity, cleanliness, etc. Frame your life in goodness. And second, make some connection with the Supreme. It's not this ism versus that ism. It's a principle. The principle of making that connection with the Supreme. And find ways that work for you according to the wisdom, I'm calling it generic term, wisdom literature, that explains this is how connection with the Supreme can be established, and something resonates with you, you do that. And then consciousness will elevate, because the darker things are being diminished and the consciousness elevating things are being increased. And the principles are explained in Bhagavad Gita. Like a big one is the conception of who you are. And the next big one is how you relate to work, because we all do stuff. So what's the purpose of that stuff? In material consciousness, it's I do something because I want to enjoy the fruits of that something. And then there's an elevated consciousness way of looking at the work that you do. It's meant as an offering to the Supreme. And that's how I live my life. Or that's how a person in elevated consciousness lives their life. So I want to learn that standard, that system, that lifestyle, and be in a company of people who also appreciate that lifestyle. The elevation of consciousness lifestyle. And it can be different. This practice and that discipline and this group and thing can be different. That's fine. And I respect differences. But I want to make that connection. I want to be with people, make that connection. And that'll help you elevate consciousness. Over on this side of the room, anything? Put the spotlight, maybe make you uncomfortable. I won't look over there. Over here, yes.
I don't need that.
But there are people remote that would like to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. You talked about a lot of things,
Yeah.
especially the MY, my body, my hands. As you know, we all go through a lot of different challenges, and we worry a lot. So when I'm worrying, the consciousness is worrying, not the body, right? I'm trying to understand that, and also how can we manage that?
How can you manage stress that comes from worrying too much?
Yeah.
It's a big topic. It's like these days, it's on the rise. Statistically and experientially. So your question corresponds somewhat or largely with her question. By elevation of consciousness, that lower energy of stress and we call it negative emotions of varieties diminishes. When the circumstance doesn't need to change for your consciousness to be above the circumstance, and then you can evaluate the circumstance with much greater clarity and efficiency and effectiveness. So the short answer is, do those things that lead to higher consciousness, and you'll be much better able to manage the negative emotions, some things. A little sharing, just anecdotal. About a month and a half ago, we had a nice gathering at a farm community in mid-Pennsylvania for people in the East Coast. 100 people came that really didn't know anything about anything. But it was, the end of the COVID period. They were really eager to just get out of the four walls. And it was at a farm with cows and peacocks and, fresh air, and Body, Mind, Spirit was the title. Body, Mind, Spirit Festival or gathering or something like that. The topic was Art of Meditation, overcoming negative emotion. That was the centerpiece of the presentation that I made. And meditation helps connect with higher consciousness. That's in that second category. Some disciplines that you leave the temporary behind, and in different techniques, mantra meditation is particularly effective, but through sound, you connect with this place of higher consciousness that's who you really are. And when it's done in a peaceful setting, as far as possible, it elevates consciousness. And then the situation may still be around you, but in that higher consciousness, you can see it with detachment. You can see it with greater clarity. You can see the rock that hit you and it hurts. You can see the rock and the hurt in a different perspective. Especially in the transcendental perspective of understanding you really have nothing to do with the rock or the hurt. You deal with it because you have to deal with it, but it's not you. So this awareness of who you are as an eternal being has a big part in managing negative, not just the circumstances, but the emotions connected with the circumstances. Say it the opposite. You lose sight of who you really are, and it's a big struggle. Bhagavad Gita. Here's the verse in Sanskrit. Davi yesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. Mama eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. What does that mean? It means we struggle very hard in this material energy. And we don't get very far struggling with the material energy. Second half. However, if we connect our consciousness to the Supreme, we can easily cross beyond it. The struggle. The struggle. The circumstances don't necessarily have to change. The struggling experience will change because we get lifted by higher consciousness. And higher consciousness is connection with the Supreme. It's not an ism. It's just a principle. The idea is not, just sick. The idea is not to get people to give up that ism and take this ism because this is a better ism. It's not speaking like that. Just principle. Whatever works. And different wisdom literatures have different methods. And that's fine. Different methods are suitable. Even in Bhagavad Gita, it's one system. And there are different practices principles of practices of yoga that lead to higher consciousness. And it's good to know what they are. And, as you learn them and you try to live by them, you experience something. It's a mitigation of the unnecessary negative emotions and being stuck in those negative emotions it's very debilitating. Unnecessarily. Okay. Everybody's happy. Or at least processing. Way in the back.
We are also not making good progress in material life either. And we are struggling in both ways. spiritual versus material. We keep chanting all the time. Still, we are not moving forward.
Materially.
Feel like that.
There's different explanation. You're making a statement. Let me respond to your statement. You can have a seat. Relax. Something that I heard my spiritual master say makes a lot of sense. Material well-being follows spiritual well-being like a shadow follows an object that casts the shadow. Material well-being may be, in one person's estimation, distressful, and another person's estimation could be a great fortune. It's relative. Perspectives are relative to what your expectation of material well-being. But when you have spiritual well-being, even the material aspect can fluctuate, and you're okay. You're okay because you know who you are, and you know your priorities are clear, because spiritual well-being is my priority. So today I may be prosperous, and tomorrow that prosperity may evaporate. But I know who I am, and because I know who I am, I know what's important to me, and I know what's important to me. I do those things that are important to me, and I feel contentment. When you feel contented within, material well-being will follow, including prosperity, generally speaking. However, if there's attachment to the temporary, and I'm trying to make spiritual progress, it's like trying to start a fire by pouring water on the fire. Not a good combination. So that means the spiritual well-being wasn't in order yet. Spiritual well-being, just to say it again, means to know who you are and be content with who you are as a spiritual being. That happiness is a happiness within. And when that happiness within is there, material well-being follows. That's a karma question. Like say, for example, some people don't work very hard, and they have lots of wealth. Some people work really hard, and they don't have much wealth. They don't have much to show for it. Why? It's unequal. It's a karma factor. In someone's previous life, they may have been very charitable with whatever they had. And because they were charitable with whatever they have, now they have abundance in this life. Someone else may have been very wealthy and very miserly, so now they're having, have less resource in this life. Anyway, it's not just so simple. It's a little involved, a little complex. But your good fortune, your material prosperity will follow from spiritual well-being. So here's a shadow. It says, here's a shadow over here, and here's the object casting the shadow. So here's the light. Here's the object and the shadow cast by the object. If I want that shadow to move, I need to move the object that's casting the shadow. From spiritual well-being, material well-being, which is the shadow, follows. So introspect, and look at the nature of your spiritual well-being. How am I doing? Not just the behavior, but the consciousness. And make your... It's not that you don't pay attention to things that will bring material well-being or prosperity or material achievements. When you go, somebody's a cook, I'm just going to be in good consciousness and have a nice meal at the end. You pay attention to the ingredients, the quality of the ingredients, how they're combined. You're conscious of the work that you do. Now, what's the purpose of the work that you do? Is it my tongue? Or is it I want to make something nice and make that as an offering to the Supreme? When the consciousness is make the nice offering to the Supreme, then arrangements are made by material nature. It'll come out very nice. It's karma. Some people are really gifted at cooking. Some people, they burn everything, or it doesn't come out nice. So that's a karma question. And then we have a free will choice to make. Let me try to improve for what purpose? For my tongue or for the Supreme? For my senses? So adjust, introspect on the spiritual well-being part. More than getting concerned. Back to his question about the emotions of stressful situations. Don't get stressed out over the material prosperity isn't working out the way that I had a plan for it. Go give attention to the spiritual well-being part, and it will follow.
The inner strength has given spiritual strength by chanting holy name.
Well, there are behaviors, but I'm focusing this evening on consciousness. It's where your consciousness is, not just what your behaviors are. Yes, the calling upon the Lord's holy name is very powerful, most powerful form of expression. But then I can be calling, and my consciousness is in the gutter, or distracted, or something. So, you get the idea. Anything else? I think we're good for this evening. Mongol? Mother Mongol? You want to... Okay. I brought with me some little sweets from the temple. I'm going to walk around and give some out. And then you probably have something that you cooked. You have prashadam. Okay.
It's good and dinner for everyone.
Anybody that doesn't have yet a Bhagavad Gita, there's copies, and I'll be glad. We'll be glad to give you a copy. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.